It is January 26, 2021, lesson 87 in A Course in Miracles student workbook. Reviews for 73. I will there be lights. I will use the power of my will today. It is not my will to grope about in darkness, fearful of the shadows and afraid of things unreal and unseen. Light shall be my guide today. I will follow it where it leads me, and I will look only on what it shows me. This day I will experience the peace of true perception. Okay. The mantra goes, this cannot hide the light I will to see. You stand with me in light. In the light, this will look different. Okay. 74, right? There is no will but God's. I am safe today because there is no will but God's. I can become afraid only when I believe there is another will. I try to attack only when I'm afraid, and only when I try to attack can I believe that my eternal safety is threatened. Today, I will recognize that all this has not occurred. I am safe because there is no will but God's. And then the mantra goes, let me perceive this in accordance with the will of God. It is God's will, you are his son, and you say a name of somebody, and mine as well. This part of God's will form, however I may see it. Okay. So yesterday I was mentioning how I felt very shameful about breaking my promise. And you know, that we all go through that same process. And now you're walking in the valley of the shadow of death. For you shall fear no evil. Thou art with me, thy rod, thy staff, they comfort me. Thou lead me to still waters. I forgot how it goes. Psalm 23. Okay? So, the idea of I will there be lights is actually being able to even force it out. Because when we're looking at these hyperactive emotions, right, we're looking at our whole negative spectrum of emotions, which could be our 8 to 9 circles of power, if you want to call them that, doesn't really matter. But that's basically how we're living our lives. And when we get to like anger, desire, right, pride, we are willing things. Now, there's a counter force with any force. But nonetheless, with will, you can turn that into a positive, right? There is a positive to desire. There is a positive to anger, which is passion. There is a positive to pride, right? When you're proud of yourself, that is loving yourself, okay? And being able to will it, especially in the darkness, right? When you're fearful so much and afraid of things that you have not seen yet, of the unknown, or that you perceive as real, then you're starting to really understand the second lesson as well, right? I will there be lights. So that means that no matter where you go, you are the light, right? What Eckhart Tolle says his presence is almost like walking in a fog, right? And you have a flashlight, and you can only see so far ahead with this flashlight because of all the fog, but yet that's your presence, right? So you are the essence of what is lighting up the space so you can see within the darkness, if that makes sense. So when you realize that you failed, right, you're going to have this shame, and you're going to have all these stories that come up, and you have to start welcoming them. Okay, it's going to be very difficult to welcome because most oftentimes we've avoided these emotions and they've been difficult for us to cope with. So we've found different ways to cope or to survive with, or we have defense mechanisms, so we start lashing out some way somehow to just feel better about ourselves, or even stronger in some way somehow. So on the idea that there is no will but God's, right? It doesn't matter how bad you've sinned. If your heart is dedicated to God, to the universe, then you are considered part of the universe, part of God's children, right? And you're recognizing that all this has not occurred. Okay, so you did not fail. You only fail and drop down in your own consciousness when you're deliberately chasing things that are disorienting you. When you know deliberately, because you can't be culpable if you don't know any better, if that makes sense. Now, if you know better, then of course you are deliberately sinning. And that's what I needed to understand, because at that moment I thought I was deliberately sinning, but I wasn't. Why? Because I didn't know better, and now I do, if that makes sense. Sometimes you have to fail to know what it looks like to actually succeed. So when I'm looking at this idea that none of that actually occurred, then I can actually forgive myself. And that's the most important thing, and the important lesson that you have to take from what happened with me, because we're all going to fail. Everybody's going to fail. It doesn't matter how good you do this. It's almost like jujitsu. You're not going to be good if you don't get choked out. And that's the only way that you'll actually get good, if you get choked out, because you get to a point that you're tired of getting choked out, and you have no other choice but to follow through on your word, right? So there's this video with Jordan Peterson talking about going in the belly of the beast to save your father. Now, from a clinical perspective, he says that you need a path and a goal, because you need a goal, right, that is bigger than you, that embeds positive emotions. So again, we're looking at negative and positive emotions. Positive emotions means that you're living a good life, that you're happy, okay? And that creates a valuable hierarchy. So that means that you're going through the levels of competency, right? You don't know what you don't know, you learn what you don't know, and then you know what you do know, and of course you go through the process of mastering, okay? Just like ourselves, we go through this self-awareness, exploration, discovery, understanding, loving, transformation, and self-mastery. So now we're looking at this goal that now you are just completely pushing everything aside and dedicating your heart and soul into this, okay? And that means you have to sacrifice some other things, right? Now, don't look at it as a sacrifice, just say that you are deliberately not doing specific things, because for a paradigm shift, you have to remove all obstacles, right? You have to sometimes delete some friends, or some habits that have inhibited you from actually achieving the next stage of your life, right? Because you realize what you've been doing doesn't work anymore, and once you learned what is the solution, now you're living by example, because you have eliminated the obstacles, and now you're embedding it as if it were going to the gym, right? Now it's a part of your lifestyle. It's not something that you do, right, deliberately. It's just now a part of you, okay? It's just, you are healthy. That's what you're doing. So the sacrifice means something to you, right? And now you're creating meaning, right? Meaning in your suffering. Now you're in the belly of the beast, or the valley of the shadow of death. And the more meaningful, or the bigger the goal, or the better the goal, the more full and rich it's going to be. So he has this whole Joseph Campbell hero's journey idea, right? So it's very masculine in essence, but you can also see it from a woman's perspective, because again, everything is the universe, and the universe is the universal womb. Okay, so now you're developing vision, okay? And you're fleshing yourself out philosophically, right? You want to aim at the highest goal that you can manage. So you always want to be able to put yourself in a position that you're flowing with life, which means that you have the level of challenge with the level of skill, and now you're at flow, right? Which means that you have reached potentiality and reality meeting together. Now you're not thinking, and you're just acting from your state of being, if that makes sense. And being able to do things that scare you, okay? So now you're challenging yourself, because it's stretching you out. And identifying something that someone is avoiding is very important, right? So you do this in psychology, right? And it doesn't matter how it works. It's not that you are becoming less afraid, it's that you're becoming braver. Because what I've always known is that courage is an imaginary line that you draw in front of fear, and then you just cross, okay? And just like in the book Emotional Agility, I forgot what her name was. She was from South Africa, Dr. Suzanne something. She said that courage is fear walking. So you have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, in shame, in guilt, in fear, right? and that is being able to see light within the darkness, because that's what is lighting the world up. Even though this body, right, as fragile as it may be, can only do so much, but your spirit is what gives it light. It's what gives it life. Okay, this is what gives it love. Love is what's made this body. Okay, so you break it down in pieces. You can't do it at once, right? And it doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you start. You have to start doing, right? It's the law of action. You can't just sit and wish. You have to meet life halfway. So you start seeing and doing things new, right? You start doing new things, and that's informative, and that creates the action, right? So now you're seeing the environment, and it's developing your actions and behaviors, and your actions and behaviors start becoming skills and capabilities, and that incorporates skills that turn into a transformation of perception. So now that is moving up in the logical levels of learning, right? From skills and capabilities to values and beliefs, right? It's changing your perception of why you're doing things, and it eventually is going to change who you are in essence as your identity, because now you're not just doing it just to do it, you're doing it because it's a part of you. It's something that is calling you beyond you, and that's what your purpose is, beyond your identity. That's what self-transcendence is. So you're looking more to you because you've tried something new, right? It's because now you're being activated. So he says that there's biological evidence that if you put yourself in new situations, the genetic codes for new proteins start to build, right? And it starts building a new neural structure. So just like you have experienced these emotions within your body, your central nervous system is adjusting to that. So the protoplasmic is stretching out what you are able to do. So if you were sensitive before, you're desensitizing yourself to actually feel more, right, and experience more without losing yourself. And when you work out, it's the same thing, right? You have the muscles and the nervous system, right? So it calms you down when you work out, and it's also building the muscle at the same time. So you start seeing your true potential in these stressful situations, okay? And that's what being poised and calm and present actually means, because you've gone through the things deliberately and it doesn't bother you anymore. When something stops bothering you in the old way, it ceases to exist in the old way, right? So there's no way to know how much you know of how much is locked inside you, right? But the only way to actually know is by putting yourself in the darkest place, right? The brutal parts that turn you on maximally, right? So you see things as dark as they can be, right? So you start seeing the potential composite of all the ancestral wisdom that is locked inside you, okay? And I love this so much because it's almost like the show Avatar, right? The Last Airbender, and how it has all the other avatars and they're all helping. It's the same thing with your genes, right? They're all activating. And unless you stress yourself out and put yourselves in deliberate challenges, you're not going to be able to access all that, okay? The bigger the challenge, the more it's going to turn on. The more you do, right, the more of what you can be turns on, and you turn into the ancestral father, the consequence of all these living beings that come before you. That's all part of your biological potentiality, right? Maximal potential. Although the suffering is great and the malevolence is deep, your capacity to transcend it is stronger, right? Negative, even from the most negative viewpoints, the most positive possible consequence of this is being able to see the worst and prevailing from it. So again, no matter how difficult life can be, you can actually see it beyond this, because there is no will other than God's, and you will God's will through you in this conduit, because you are the light of God. And that's basically what it Jesus said, right? But it's all good. Anyways, that was a great one. Love you guys very much. God bless. See you guys tomorrow.